Now that's how we take it back to the 80s. Welcome to Deep Creek. Glad you guys are here. Steve has asked me to speak this morning, so I'm honored. Yeah, I'm really excited. My name is Davey. If you don't know who I am, I'm the youth pastor here. So I'm taking a little poll. How many of you think I was alive in the 80s? Wave at me. Come on. Really? Really? You don't think I'm cool enough to have been born in the 80s? I was, 87. And my favorite... Yeah, my favorite outfit in the 80s was a diaper. It was awesome, cruising around, you know. So I'm very qualified to speak on the 80s. I was 3 at the end of it, okay? So don't worry, you're in good hands. So what they tell me and what I found is that 80s was a decade of excess, life without boundaries, okay? So when I think of life without boundaries, you know, I think of like pedal to the metal, you know, drugs, sex, alcohol, rock and roll, like just going nuts. In fact, I think of someone that's just like so hardcore, you know, they land themselves in jail, like no limits, excess, all that stuff. So I found a picture of someone in jail. I want to show them to you, and this is a real picture of someone in jail. Yeah, that's me. And yes, I was detained against my will. I could not get out. And yes, I am on staff to pastor your kids here. So don't worry about it. I wasn't in jail for any of the reasons I said earlier. It's a small thing, so don't stress about it. If you really have to know, you can ask me later. But it's all good. It's all good. Okay, so I want to talk about excess, okay? I want to talk about the pursuit of some things that I think we have in America, okay? The pursuit of possessions, pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and the pursuit of pleasure, okay? So in the 80s, these things were all extremely prevalent, and we need to look no farther than the famous people in the 80s, okay? We've got Michael Jackson, Excessive Life, Whitney Houston, Prince, Kurt Cobain, John Candy, John Belushi, River Phoenix, Keith Whitley. There was even a band named In Excess. I was like, well, there you go. There it is. So these are all rich and famous people, but they all have one thing in common. None of them are still alive today. Excess can be dangerous. Okay? Life without limits can be dangerous. I know it's fun, I know it's awesome, but it can be really dangerous. So I found an article on the 80s by the National Review. It said, worrying that the 1990s would be a decade in which the bills of the 1980s would come due, a Time magazine reporter declared, the past decade brought growth and an anything-goes attitude. And then glibly summarized the 80s with 5 words, get rich, borrow, spend, enjoy. Okay? So the 80s was dubbed the decade of greed. That's pretty harsh. And it was seen by many as one long consumption binge. Maybe I wasn't really born in the 80s. I was like 91. No, I'm 30. I was in the 80s, okay? So I got 3 points for you real quick, okay? And the first one is excess does not equal success, okay? I don't believe excess started in the 80s and stopped in the 90s. I believe it kept going. In fact, I think if anything, it's like picked up speed. I think excess is very much still around, and I want to show you a few statistics that I found to show you just how prevalent excess is in our culture, okay? In 1983, companies spent $100 million marketing to children. Hey, you got to buy this, you got to buy that, you got to buy this, you got to buy that. You know, all the time, everywhere you see it on TV, you got to buy this, you got to buy that. Today, they spend $17 billion a year marketing to children. $17 billion convincing kids they're not going to be happy unless they have more stuff, okay? Fashion designers, they used to work on a 4-season rotation to get you to buy clothes. Go something like this. Hey, your clothes that you're wearing last winter, those aren't in fashion anymore. You need new clothes for this winter. That swimsuit you had last summer, forget about it. So out of style. A year old, oh my gosh. You got to buy a new one. Okay, that's how they used to do things. Now, fashion designers work on a 52-week rotation. They want you to feel out of style if the clothes you bought 2 weeks ago, if you're wearing clothes you bought 2 weeks ago. So you go out and buy new stuff. It's crazy, right? It's crazy. Excess, okay? And listen to this. You probably won't believe it. Then I'll explain it, though. Americans are exposed to between 4,000 and 10,000 commercials or advertisements a day. An author, Ron Marshall, found this hard to believe. So he said, I'm going to test this out. I'm going to wake up one morning, and I'm going to count all the advertisements I see. I'm like, dude, that's a lot of counting. So this is what he did. He said, on my test day, I woke up in the morning to my Sony radio alarm clock, heard about 14 ads on my local station before I opened my eyes and hit snooze. I used my Panasonic TV and Dish Network receiver remotes, noticed the Kenwood receiver and the Toshiba DVD player, and watched and listened to 46 TV commercials as I got going. I got dressed in my Fruit of the Loom undershirt, Big Dog shirt, Wrangler jeans, and Nike shoes. 11 brand advertisements are within eyesight of the closet. I'm not digging for them. I opened my pantry and counted 214 brand labels, all colorful and professionally created. I got my box of Kellogg's for my Jersey-made milk and count 62 product brands. I opened a can of Folgers coffee to brew in my Mr. Coffee Maker. I've gotten around 487 ad exposures, and I haven't even finished breakfast. It's all around us. But the thing about culture, when it's all around you, you don't realize it. It becomes normal. You become numb to it, okay? I lived out of the country for a while, and that's when I really, saw the big contrast. When I came back to the U.S., I was like, whoa, so much stuff, because I'd gotten used to living in Africa for a while. So the pursuit of possessions, I think we know this. It's just good to be reminded. The pursuit of possessions will never fulfill us. It'll let us down every time, okay? Proverbs 23:4 says it the best. Says, do not wear yourself out to get rich. Very simple. It's just not worth it. The wisest person in the world said that. Don't wear yourself out to get rich, okay? We can't chase our money our whole lives and end up living the life God wanted us to. It just doesn't work that way, okay? Confucius, he put it like this. Whoever chases two rabbits at once catches neither, okay? Jesus put it like this. No one can serve two masters. For you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money, okay? So we live in the wealthiest country in the world, but I don't think we realize it. Again, perspective is huge. I went to Haiti about a month ago on a missions trip just to help get renewed perspective. And these statistics might shock you if you've never lived in a third world country or you've never been outside the States. But these are real. I wouldn't lie to you on stage, okay? God is watching, and you're watching, and my senior pastor is watching. So I took someone who made $30,000 a year, okay? And I wanted to find out how they compared globally, how wealthy they were compared globally. And these are the statistics I found. Someone who makes $30,000 a year is in the top 3.8% of the wealthiest in the world. The wealthiest. I know, it sounds crazy. It's true. Your income is 21 times the global average. 21 times. You make $15.63 an hour. A laborer in Indonesia makes 50 cents an hour. This statistic, this one gets to me because it affects kids more than adults, because a lot of adults in third world countries don't consider kids important, and they spend what they do have on themselves, okay? So 50% of the world, listen to this, 50% of the world lives on less than $2 a day. Crazy. It would take a laborer in Ghana, where I lived, until the year 2042 to make $30,000. 25 years to make what someone who makes in 1 year here. Again, I know it seems crazy, but if you've only grown up here and lived here, it's tough to wrap your mind around. Your monthly salary could pay the salary of 113 doctors in Kazakhstan. It's crazy. Okay, so I want to show you a picture of one of my heroes. This is one of my youth kids when I was in Africa. And since I met him, all the pastors on staff, we used to talk about him. We're like, dude, this guy's something. He's just something special, something different. And I knew I was going to use him in a message at one point. So check out this picture of Enoch. All right. So I want to tell you about Enoch, all right? this young man, he would walk miles to church to get there every single day. He didn't have a job. He was hard of hearing. When he talked, you couldn't understand him because he was deaf. He didn't have any money, lived in abject poverty. I went to his house, and just so sad. He smelled really, really bad. Like, it was almost impossible for me to ride in the car with him and not roll my window down. And I know that sounds terrible, but he didn't have a shower. He didn't have access to these things, and he would walk everywhere. So a cultural thing in Africa is anytime they do a church service, they take an offering. And every single time they took an offering, he would go down and drop what he had in there. It was normally like 10 or 15 cents. And but he would do it all the time. And so the pastors on staff were like, dude, do you see this guy? This guy's like a hero. But the thing I want you to get about Enoch is not how generous he was, but how happy he was. He could smile. And I'm not exaggerating. He would laugh more than just about anyone I've ever met in my life. He'd make me feel good about my lame jokes. Like, I'd go up to him and say a joke, and he would laugh and laugh and laugh. I'm like, thank you for making me feel good, man. But he was happy. He lived in abject poverty, but he was happy. And I find that to be true in a lot of the third world countries. So my next point is excess does not bring happiness. Jim Carrey said this. I thought it was really cool. He said, I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can realize it's not the answer. So let's talk about America's happiness. How's our happiness factor doing? America is actually not that happy. Only 1/3 of Americans claim to be happy. So that's like you guys over here. You guys are happy, and the rest of y'all are like really grouchy and really mean, okay? So you didn't laugh because you're not happy. I had to. So, okay, listen to this. This is interesting. Studies show that there's virtually no difference in happiness between those who make $50,000 a year and those who make $50 million. And the reason for that is called the hedonic treadmill. Turn to your neighbor and say, what? What are you saying, man? The hedonic treadmill, what are you talking about? Like, what's that mean? It states that whatever your level of wealth that you possess, you would adapt to it and always want more. So it's the biggest enemy of happiness. The hedonic treadmill works like this. There's some guy in a brand new Lamborghini driving along the road, looks up and sees his friend's private jet. He says, man, if I could only have a private jet, then I wouldn't have to drive everywhere. I'd be happy, Then a guy in a brand new Ford Focus driving past looks at the Lamborghini, says, hey, man, if I had that, the ladies would love me. If I just had a Lamborghini, I'd be happy. Guy in an old beat-up junker car drives past the guy in the brand new Ford Focus. Man, if I just had a reliable car that didn't break down all the time, then I'd be happy. Guy on a moped, it keeps going. Guy on a moped drives past the guy in an old junky car and says, if I just had something to ride in that would keep me dry and out of the weather, then I'd be happy. Guy's walking, sees the guy on the moped zooming by, says, moped spits some mud on him, says, man, if I just had a moped, I could get to work so much faster, wouldn't have to walk, I'd be happy. Guy walks past a hospital, guy in the hospital looks out the window, says, if only I could walk, I'd be happy. And that's how it works. That's the hedonic treadmill, and that is the number one enemy of happiness, okay? So excess does not bring happiness. Excess does not equal success. Point number 3, excess is not God's best, okay? I want to talk about the pursuit of pleasure, specifically regarding media. And I'm a youth pastor. Listen, I have something really heavy on my heart that I want to share with you guys this morning, and it is the excessive use of social media among kids and teenagers, okay? So I've got some friends of mine that I'm going to interview, so you guys can come up on stage. All right, give them a big round of applause. And So while you guys are getting comfortable, let me share a statistic. This doesn't just apply to kids and teenagers. Listen to this statistic. The average American watches more than 4 hours of TV a day. That's 28 hours a week or 2 months a year. If you live to be 65, you will have spent 9 years watching TV. It doesn't seem like that much when it's incremental, right? But that's rough. And binging Netflix, man, I can't imagine. Okay, so maybe 25. All right, so guys, thank you for coming. I know it takes a lot of guts to get up here and talk about what you're going to talk about. So let's start off with an easy question. How many hours do you think your friends, because I know you don't, but how many hours do you think your friends spend on social media and cell phone usage a day?
3 or 4?
Pretty good.
Yeah, 5.
5.
I'd say out of like a 24-hour period, at least like 25 hours probably.
Oh
or
my God,
26 maybe.
dude, that's a lot. You've got some crazy friends.
about right.
You've got some talented friends right there. Okay, so next question is, and I want you to really address the parents because, guys, culture has shifted drastically and it's kind of gone under the radar. There's a lot of stuff going on in this generation that we have no idea about, seriously. So I want you to address the parents. What do you think parents need to know about what really goes on with your cell phones and social media? And again, this is excess use. This isn't like, so go ahead.
Well, they do pretty much whatever they want to do on social media. Whatever they feel like they need to do, whatever the desire is to do, they do it. It encompasses their lives almost. That's what it's come to. Instagram, I feel, for girls have it worse off than guys do because they almost put themselves at a standard and they envy all the other girls' pages because they're like, oh, I wish that I looked like that girl in a bathing suit. I wish my Instagram looked as good as hers. And it puts them in this state of self-consciousness where they don't believe in themselves and they have zero confidence and almost depression. It's terrible in my opinion. So yeah, that's what you need to know.
So I think that one thing you really need to know is social media can be an awesome thing. Wonderful, you connect with people, you stay in contact with your friends, see what they're doing, but it is a highly negative thing in teenagers' lives as well. Like, there's so much under the radar, like Justin said, that just goes unnoticed by parents because this is a new thing. I mean, bullying, definitely the insecurity thing for girls and probably guys too. And it can be really toxic for relationships, although it's meant to build them up because we're avoiding that face-to-face contact. And if we're not guided properly, it can go wild.
Yeah, to me, it's kind of like, in a way, it's a numbing device. You can use it whenever, and you can get this false sense of popularity, and you can just go on Instagram, and you're like, ooh, I got 12 likes. Man, I'm popular, and it gives you this false sense of, popularity, and it's kind of a barrier and a way to, as well as, also stay insecure. And it's just a barrier because, like, for example, in my own life, if someone calls me, I end it and I'm like, why are you calling me, weirdo? Just text me, And then, so it's kind of like a way to avoid having a conversation with people, and it makes it, because that screen is always your barrier, and like in real life conversations, things can happen, and it's not always 100% perfect, but when you're behind a screen, you always have that barrier.
I want to ask you one more question, but first, students, you are not what your social media says you are. You are so much more. So much more. You are not what those bullies say you are. I'll get into more of that later, but it's horrible what some of these kids will say to each other over social media. And it's like they'll say it over social media, but they'll never say it in person. So, Alex, you told me something, and you're not the first student to tell me this. I've heard it before. Tell me what happens at Charlotte High School, or any high school really, lunchtime, cell phones.
Okay, well, on iPhone, there's this thing called AirDrop, and it requires Bluetooth, and what you can do is you can basically AirDrop messages via that, and you could, if you have it on, you can receive it or choose to accept it or decline it. And what happens is students will take inappropriate photos of other students and use it as a way for revenge, and kind of just airdrop that at lunch for everyone to see.
And unless you think that's not common, it's very common. It's extremely common. It's not the exception. It's extremely common. Okay, so one last question, guys. How do you think parents can help in this environment? Because this is the first generation of parents that are really parenting students that have unlimited access to devices at any time, whenever they want. So what advice would you have for parents?
I'd say two things. One, teach your children their value. Where their worth comes from is not what other people think about them. You have to drill it into your child or your grandchild, whoever you're influencing, that their value comes directly from God. And although people's opinions that you respect are important, the one thing that really matters in all circumstances is God's opinion of you, and He loves you no matter what.
Yes, Lord.
Two, monitor what your children are doing, and build relationship so that if there is something negative, they know that they can come talk to you about it. Because a lot of times you come across something on social media you're not expecting, and it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Let me just hide it. Like, I don't want to get my social media taken away. Like, so here we go. I'll just hide it, and you stuff and stuff and stuff. So no, be there for your kids. Like, let them know that you're not going to freak out if there's something negative. Be open and honest and build that relationship with them.
Yeah, she hit it right on the mark. I know that with me in the past, trying to develop that kind of relationship with my parents has been very difficult, to allow them access to that part of my life, because it's a completely different part of a kid's life. There's your real life where you talk to your parents, talk to other people, and then there's your social media life. And what you do on there is completely different. So I know that I've had trouble with that, and I need to be more open, but it also comes from the parents. It's also your responsibility, not to tell you what to do with your kids, but it's also your responsibility to make sure that, like Hannah said, feel comfortable. Yeah.
Yep, I agree.
Well said. Okay, give them a round of applause. These are all student leaders in the youth group. I trust them so much. Thank you, guys. Solid students right here. Okay, so not to belabor the point, but I want to talk about this a little more, okay? Because there's an excess, and I really want you to understand why it's so dangerous. Okay, so really quickly, I got a lot of this stuff from a guy whose name is Simon Sinek. He's a leadership guru. But when we engage with social media, when we engage with our cell phones, it releases a chemical in our brain called dopamine. Okay? Dopamine is the same chemical in our brain that is released when we drink alcohol, when we smoke, and when we gamble. In other words, it's highly addictive. Okay? And dopamine makes you feel really good even when things aren't really good. It numbs you. Dopamine numbs your brain. So what's happening is these students are disconnecting themselves from reality, from problems, and instead of dealing with the problems and learning how to build meaningful relationships in person and learning how to rely on God, what they're doing is they're taking their phones and they're numbing their feelings. Just like an alcoholic would use alcohol to numb stress or numb this, they're numbing their problems away and they don't even realize it. It's highly addictive. It's why when you try and get your student's cell phone from them, it's a fight, because it's a chemical called dopamine and it's an addiction. Okay? So the statistics show, it's scientifically proven, people who spend more time on social media are more depressed than those who don't. Scientific, shown, okay? We know that to be true. And like all addictions, it will eventually destroy relationships. You'll spend money on it, and it will make your life worse. And Simon Sinek brought out a good point. He said, listen, we have age restrictions on drinking, smoking, and gambling, but we don't on cell phones. But it's just as addictive. It's normally unlimited access. So it's so different, adults, that you know, students don't even have to, like, to get a date. They don't even have to be like, yo, what up, girl? How you doing? You know, like, they don't even have to do any of that nonsense. All they have to do is swipe right. Boom, you're a stud. Swipe right. That's all you got to do. Okay? So, the study of 200 13-year-olds, they asked these 13-year-olds, can we have complete access to everything you do on your phones? And the parents let them, and so they did a study on 213-year-olds. The professionals were shocked at the amount of sexuality and language that 13-year-olds were doing. Girls were saying, stop trying to be popular, go kill yourself. I'm serious. Any word you want to use being used. Sexuality, kids are losing their innocence faster, but they're maturing slower. It's extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. Okay? So what Alex was talking about earlier, this is a common practice now for boyfriend and girlfriend to send inappropriate pictures of themselves to each other. Okay? And what happens is when you end the relationship, that person will take those pictures that you've sent, and it's called exposing. They will expose you to the rest of the world for revenge. And parents, this generation has a lot more to deal with at their age than we ever did. A lot more. We're on the brink of the worst mental crisis we have had in decades, and it's mostly flying under the radar. Okay? So, I want to talk about Snapchat for a little. I don't want to harp on it. It's just one app that you can download, but it's really popular among the teenagers and kids. Okay? So, Snapchat was originally designed so that college students could send nude pictures of each other and they would disappear, okay? That's why it was originally created. This is a statistic, 30% of Snapchat users use it because their parents don't. The average Snapchat user checks their Snapchat 18 times a day and over 6,570 times a year. And these are the stories that are in the app on Snapchat that you can't avoid. They're right there with pictures that you're seeing, okay? Here's the first article. The sex things women deal with. These bloody shows will leave you shook. What it's like to date when you can't have sex. The worst things men do at strip clubs. 13-year-olds reading this stuff. Your sex questions answered by science. Bored? Learn how to read your palms. And so you know, these are all articles from the past few days. Alex pulled it up earlier and checked the articles today. These are the articles that are on it today. Crazy reasons how to know if you're good in bed. The other article that's up today is, can you really rock a visible thong? Here's the last one I found. Is this trend too sexy to wear? Okay. So here's the worst case scenario with all this stuff. This is extreme access, extreme exposure, and that's why I wanted to tell you guys. Worst case scenario is we are seeing an increase in death due to accidental drug overdoses. Students are dropping out of school or taking leaves of absence for depression, which has been unheard of up until this point. And I know, parents, there are biological reasons some students are depressed, but I think a lot of depression can be prevented. In fact, rates of teen depression and suicide have skyrocketed since 2011, which is about when 50% of the population had a smartphone. A guy was studying the generations. He's been studying generations past and present since the 30s, and he said normally generations are like waves, like the differences in generations. He said he's never seen anything like it. In 2012, everything spiked, and it hasn't gone down. Loneliness, depression, everything has spiked. He said he's never seen anything like it in all those years that he's been studying it. So it's not an exaggeration to describe this generation as being on the brink of the worst mental health crisis in decades. Much of this deterioration can be traced to their phones. Okay? Now here's the good news. The guys that did the study on the 200 13-year-olds, they said the negative effects of social media were prevented when parents were actively involved. Extremely helped. So here's the best case scenario with this. The entire population going through life and just never finding deep fulfillment or joy, never knowing how to cope with problems, unless the adults that have gone before them are involved in their lives. Parents, grandparents, if you're not a parent, find a student, get involved with their lives. Students are not looking for cool. Back in the day, we were looking for cool people, cool adults. They're not looking for cool anymore. They're looking for caring. So we have excess in, we have pursuit of possessions, pursuit of happiness, and pursuit of pleasure. Okay, so I want to end with a verse from Luke 12, 15 through 21. This is the New Living Translation, and this is what Jesus said. He said, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured in how much you own." Then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, "What should I do? I don't have enough room for all my crops." Then he said, "I know. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones." The American dream, right? Then he said, "I'll have enough room to store all my wheat and other goods, and I'll sit back and say to myself, 'My friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy.' But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will have everything you worked for?' Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have," and listen to the line I want you to hear, because this is how we fix all this excess. This is how it's solved, okay? "But not have a rich relationship with God." So how do we fight excess that is all around us? We're seeing 5,000 advertisements today. How do we fight these things? Rich relationship with God. Do you ever just feel worn out or tired? Or maybe you've been chasing all this stuff and it's just not working out and it's really getting you down. Or maybe you're struggling right now. And I know you guys know this, but it's just good to be reminded every now and then. The only way to find true lasting fulfillment and joy is through Jesus. So maybe you've never started a relationship with him, or maybe you're sitting here this morning and said, "You know what, maybe I've been pursuing something I didn't realize I was pursuing." What a great day to get back to Jesus, or to get to Jesus for the first time. So if you're tired in here and you're worn out, you're just struggling, I have a verse for you that I think God wants you to hear this morning, okay? Jesus said, "Come to me, all who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest." Americans are searching for happiness, but we're not finding it because we're searching in the wrong places. Jesus, you've got to, every verse that I read today, you've got to put it in perspective with this verse, John 10:10. Jesus said, "I have come to give you life and life to the full." Jesus wants you to have the best life ever. He wants us to. There's nothing wrong with that, but he wants us to do it his way. Okay? So I want to close with a poem that is actually from a rap song written by one of my favorite Christian rappers, Lecrae. The title of this poem is "Don't Waste Your Life." Okay? So it goes like this. I know a lot of people out there that are scared they're going to die. But while I'm here living, I got to ask why. What am I here for? I got to figure it out. Should I waste my life? No! I got to make it count. If Christ is real, then what am I going to do about it? Paul said, if Christ isn't resurrected, we've wasted our lives. But see, that implies that our lives are built around Jesus being alive. Christ is more than everything you'll ever try. Better than pretty women and sinning, and that's no lie. We're created for Him. Out of the dust, He made us for Him. He saves us for Him. Jesus comes and He raises for Him. Magnify the Father. Why bother with something lesser? He made us so we could bless Him. To the world, we confess Him. Living and driven, given a vision, fulfilling the commission He handed us. Are you ready? Let's go. Persecution, let's go. Across the nations, let's go. Tribulation, let's go. He hung on the cross in the cold. He died for the young and the old. Suffer? Yeah. Do it for Christ. So you're trying to figure out what to do with your life. Stay focused. You see, people start to get living for a job. Make a little money, they start living for a car. Get them a wife, house, kids, and a dog. Then they retire, they're living high on the hog. But guess what? They didn't really ever live at all. To live is Christ. So for Christ we give it all. He's the treasure you'll never find in a mall. Your money, your singleness, marriage, talent, your time, they were loaned to you to show the world that Christ is divine. See, my whole world is built around Him. He needs life in these rhymes. I refuse to waste my life. Here's my gifts, my talent, my time. Because I'm constantly trying to be used to praise of Christ. See, if He's truly raised to life, if He's truly raised to life, then this news should change your life. And if you don't see His ways in my days and my nights, you can hit my brakes. You can stop my life. See, I lost my rights. I lost my life. Forget the money and the cars. The cost is Christ. And no one can ever offer me anything that will cost that price. It's so easy to lose sight of how good Jesus really is. He's the only one that will ever satisfy. I want to end with a quote from one of my favorite speakers. His name is Leonard Ravenhill. He says this: are the things you're living for worth Christ dying for? Let's pray. God, you knew who was going to be here today. And Lord, you knew what they needed to hear. I didn't, but you did. God, I'm praying for those that are in the room, that they're tired, they're worn out, they're frustrated, they're searching for happiness everywhere they go, but they're coming up short time and time again. God, I pray that right now you would wrap your loving arms around them and they would feel your presence. Because, God, your presence is better than any drug, any chemical, any amount of money. Your presence is all we need. And Jesus, it's so easy to lose sight of that. So God, I commit myself to you again right now. I say, I'm yours. Take my life. Take my future. Because you're going to do with it way more than I could ever conjure up. Lord, I pray for those that are in the room that have never met you before. Jesus, they're missing out on the greatest thing this world has to offer. And that is the creator of the world. It's you. So Lord, I thank you, God, for what you're doing in our lives. And Lord, I pray that people wouldn't walk out of this room feeling condemned. That wasn't my motive. God, I pray they would walk out feeling encouraged. Encouraged that there's more and that there's a better way. And that way is you. The only way, Jesus Christ. So Lord, I thank you once again for your presence. I thank you for your love when I don't deserve it. And I worship you.